Hello again, fourth grade, and welcome to lesson 5-6. In this lesson, we're going to continue using partial quotients to divide, except now we're going to be working with greater dividends. So that means we're starting with a greater whole number, and we're going to use the strategies that we learned to kind of break numbers apart before we are able to do our division. Let's go ahead and watch our short lesson video first, and then we're going to get started.
How can you use partial quotients to divide greater dividends? A total of 277 people signed up to audition for a talent show. 5 people at a time were brought in for a group interview. How many group interviews were needed to audition all 277 people? Find 277 divided by 5. You can estimate and use partial quotients to divide. How many 5s are in 277? Estimate. 5 times 40 is equal to 200. 5 times 50 is equal to 250. 5 times 60 is equal to 300. 60 is too many, so use 50. After 50 groups are interviewed, how many people have been interviewed in all?
Select your answer.
So here, remember your basic facts. So do 5 times 5 first. So 5 times 5 groups of 10. We know 5 times 5 is 25. The 25 groups of 10 is 250.
250 people have been interviewed. There are 27 people who still have not been interviewed. How many 5s are in 27? Estimate. 5 times 5 is equal to 25. 5 times 6 is equal to 30. 6 is too many, so use 5. There are 2 people left over. How was 277 broken apart to divide by 5?
So let's take a look at how they did this in parts. Let's start again. All right, so if we look at this,
5 times 50 equals 250.
so they did 5 times 50 because they know 5 times 5 is 25. So 5 times 50 will give you 250. So they started with that. They subtracted off the 250, and then they had 27 left over. Then they had to figure out how many groups of 5 are in 27.
5 times 5 equals 25.
So since 5 times 5 is 25, that's as close as we can get to 27 without passing it when we're skip counting by 5s. So they put a 5 up here and they subtracted that group of 25. 5 times 5 is 25. And they found out that they would have 2 left over. So they added their 2 partial quotients, 50 plus 5 equaled 55, with a remainder of 2.
2 is the remainder. There are no more 5s in 277.
277 was broken apart as 250 plus 25 plus 2.
Breaking apart big numbers makes them easier to divide.
Divide until the remainder is less than the divisor. 2 is less than 5, so there are no more 5s in 277. 277 divided by 5 is equal to 55, remainder 2. What do the quotient and remainder mean? How many group interviews were needed? There were 55 group interviews with 5 people in each group. 2 people remain. A total of 56 group interviews were needed to audition all 277 people.
Now remember, we talked about this in class. They need to interview all of the people. So even if the last group is not an equal group of 5, they still need to be interviewed. So just like we were talking about the example from your guided practice from our previous lesson about putting the sweaters in different boxes, even though the last box was not full, we still needed that additional box to put the leftover sweaters in it. Just like this, we need to interview those last group of 2 people, even though they don't fit neatly into a group of 5. So we would have 55 groups of 5 and then 1 group of 2 left over at the end. That's why it's a remainder, since it doesn't divide equally into the groups like we were working with. Now for this question, it says a total of 277 people signed up for an audition to audition for a talent show. 5 people at a time were brought in for group interviews. The number of group interviews needed was 277 divided by 5 was 5, remainder 2. How can you use multiplication and addition to check your answer? So remember, anytime you do any kind of operation, you want to check your work. You want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. So in order to use the opposite or the inverse operation, remember the opposite of division is multiplication. So let's do 55 times 5 to find our answer there. And then whatever our answer here, we're going to add the remainder 2 to that answer to figure out how much our sum is going to be. Now, if our answer here is equal to 277, after we add those 2, then we know our answer is correct. I know 50 times 5 is 250. 250 plus another group of 5 times 5, which is 25. So 250, I'm going to break this apart into 50 times 5 plus 5 times 5, right? I'm going to use my distributive property here. And I know 50 times 5 is 250, right? Because 5 times 5 is 25 plus that 0, plus that other group of 25. Is going to give me an answer of 250 plus 25 will give me 275. Now I'm going to take that 275 and I'm going to add that remainder of 2 to figure out what I get. So 275 plus 2, 75 plus 2 is 77, so 277. Now, as long as the number that I get after I multiply and then add my remainder back in is the same as my dividend in the question, then I know I did my work correctly. So let's go ahead and take a look at our notes first, and then we'll come back for our guided practice. Now, for our notes for this lesson, we are going to work on, again, using partial quotients to divide with greater dividends. So to find the quotient for greater dividends, you can first estimate to find out about how much your quotient should be, and then use partial quotients to solve for your exact answer. So for example, if I have 153 divided by 9, I have to think, how close can I get to 153 by groups of 9? Well, I know 9 times 2 is 18, so 9 times 20 is 180. So I know my answer is going to be less than 20 because 180 is too high. That's going past what I have here. So I have to stop and think, how many groups of 9 are there in 153? So I'm going to stack and use my partial quotients to find my answer. So I know there are 10 groups of 9 at least in 153. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to put my 10 on top and I'm going to subtract 90 from 153. So 3 minus 3 is 0. I can't do 5 minus 9, so I needed to borrow. That 5 became a 15, and that 1 became a 0. 15 minus 9 gave me 6, so I was left with 63. Now, I need to think how many groups of 9 are in 63. Well, I know 9 times 7 is 63. So I'm going to put my 7 as my next partial quotient up on top, and I'm going to subtract that 63, and I have no leftovers. So I have no leftovers. That means I have no remainders. The last step I need to do is add my partial quotients together. So 10 plus 7 is 17. That tells me that 153 divided by 9 is equal to 17. Now, I need to check my answer. So I'm going to stack and multiply. So 9 times 7 is 63. 9 times a group of 10 is 90. I'm going to add those two partial products together. 63 plus 90 gave me 153. So I know that 153 divided by 9 equaling 17 is the correct answer. So let's go ahead and continue and do another example. So I gave you guys a lot of detailed notes on the side to walk you through step by step in case you don't remember how to do this on your own. Now this example does have remainders. So remember, remainders are leftovers that are not enough to divide equally. Your remainder must be less than your divisor. If it is equal to your divisor or if it is greater than your divisor, that means you can continue dividing. You're not done yet. So I gave you guys a large number over here. I said 9,425. And I said, I want to divide that by 7. So I'm going to write my 9,425 here under my bridge. My 7 is outside to show me that that's my divisor. And then my quotients are going to go on top. So I have to think, how many groups of 7 are in 9,425? Well, I know there's at least 1,000 groups because 7 times 1,000 is 7,000. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to pick something that I know. So I'm going to write my 1,000 on top. And then I'm going to subtract 7,000 from 9,425. So that's going to leave me with 2,425, right? Because these are all minus 0. And 9 minus 7 is equal to 2. So now I have to think. Next, what number times 7 will get me close to 2,400, right? Let's estimate. Well, I know 7 times 3 is 21. So 7 times 300 will give me 2,100. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to put my 300 up here, and I'm going to subtract off 2,100. When I subtract that, I get 325 left over. So next, I have to think, what number times 7 will get me close to 325? So I know that 7 times 4 is 28. So 7 times 40 is going to be 280. Now I also know that 7 times 5 is 35. So 7 times 50 is 350, but 350 is too much. That's going past my number and I can't do that. So I'm going to use the 7 times 40 equals 280. So I put my 40 up here. I subtracted 280 from 325 and I had a remainder so far. After I subtracted, I got to 45. Now I have to think, how many groups of 7 are in 45? Well, I know that 7 times 7 is 49. That's too high. I can't use that one. So let me go back one. Let's do 7 times 6 instead of 7 times 7. 7 times 6 is 42. So I'll use 7 times 6. So I'm going to put my 6 up here as my partial quotient. Now I'm going to subtract off the 42 because 7 times 6 is 42. And I have 3 over here. Now, this 3 is less than my divisor. There are no groups of 7 in 3. So this is going to be considered my remainder. There's nothing else I can do with it here. So what I need to do last is I need to add together my partial quotient. So I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to add them together to figure out what my answer is going to be. So let's add the partial quotients. 1,000 plus 300 plus 40 plus 6. Just like we have over here, gave me an answer of 1,346. So 9,425 divided by 7 is going to be 1,346 with a remainder of 3. Remember, those 3, I couldn't share them equally between 7 groups. Now, what you do next is you have to check your work by doing your inverse operation. So I'm going to get in a little bit closer here so that you guys can see it clearly. Now, when we are doing our inverse operation, that means we're doing the opposite, and the opposite of division is multiplication. So 7 times 6 is 42. I put my 2 here and I carried my 4. 7 times 4 is 28. 28 plus 4 gave me 32. So I put my 2 here and I carried my 3. 7 times 3 is 21 plus 3 is 24. So I put my 4 here and I carried my 2. And then 7 times 1 is 7 plus 2 is 9. So this gave me 9,422. But remember, you have to add in the remainder to whatever your product is in order to find your answer. So 9,422 times 3, or sorry, plus 3 gave me 9,425. Now this number is the same as my dividend. Since these numbers match, that means that I did my work correctly. Now for over here, when I was stacking and multiplying, I was using the carrying method. I wasn't using the partial products method. If you wanted to do partial products, 7 times 6 is 42, so you would have put the entire 42. 7 times 40 would have been 280, so you would have listed 280 under that. 7 times 300 would give you 2100. Or sorry, 7 times, yes, would give you 2100. And then 7 times 1,000 would have given you 7,000, and then you would have added those together. So for this example, we picked a very large number. We went out into the thousands, and we walked through it one step at a time. So even though these numbers are big and they look kind of scary, you can work them out. Work with the facts that you know. I don't know what equals 9,425 without doing the math. So I picked something that's close by that I can work with. So let's go on and do another example. All right. So what if I wanted to do something that's a little bit smaller and more manageable? I wanted to find 450 divided by 8. So I put my 450 under my bridge. I put my 8 on the outside of my bridge. And then on top is where my quotient or partial quotients will go. So I have to think first, what 8 facts do I know that are close to 450? Or what about what's close to 45, right? Let's knock off that 0 for a minute and think 8 times what is 45 or close to 45? And we'll work with that first. So I know 8 times 5 is 40. That means 8 times 50 is 400. So I'm going to start with that. I don't need to get as close as I can right away. Right now, let's just use our estimate and find our partial quotient. So if I did 8 times 50 was 400, I put my 50 up here. I subtract 400 from 450, and it leaves me with 50. Now, next I think I need to think what 8 facts are close to 50. Well, I know 8 times 6 is 48, and 8 times 7 is going to be too high, so I can't use that one. So I'm going to stick with 8 times 6. So I'm going to put my 6 up here. 8 times 6 is 48. I'm going to subtract 48 from the 50, and I have 2 left over. Now, since this number is smaller than this number, there's no more equal groups than I can make out of it. There are no groups of 8 that you can get, that you can find in 2, because 2 is smaller than 8. So 2 is going to be my remainder. So 450 divided by 8 is going to give me 56, right? Add your partial quotients. 56 with a remainder of 2, right? 56, remainder 2. So we're going to do the inverse operation again to check our answer. And remember, if your answer matches your original dividend, then you're correct. So if we said 450 divided by 8 is 56 with a remainder of 2. So let's do 56 times 8 and see if it'll get us to 450. So 56 times 8 gave me 448. 448 plus that 2 remainder, because we need to add the remainder back in, gave me 450. So my product here is equal to my dividend in my original equation. If our numbers are the same and they match, then I know my work is done correctly. All right, let's take a look at our guided practice. So for number 1, it said, question for you guys. For number 1, it says Hillary has 254 tokens to use for games at Pizza Mania. She would like to use an equal number of tokens for each of the 3 visits that she has planned. Will Hillary be able to use the same amount of tokens for each visit? So we have to find 254 and divide it into those 3 visits to figure out, can she have an equal amount? So let's go ahead and start solving. Now I have to think, how many groups of 3 are there in 254? So I know 3 times 8 is 24. So 3 times 80 will give me 240. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm going to put my 80 up here and my 240 down here, and I'm going to subtract them, and I'm going to get 14 left over. So next I need to think, how many groups of 3 are there in 14? Well, I know there's 4 groups of 3 in 12, but if I go up to 5 groups of 3, that's 15. That's too much. So I'm going to stick with 4 groups of 3. So I'm going to put my 4 over here and subtract off 12, and I'm going to have 2 left over. Now I can't make another group of 3 if I only have 2. So 2 is going to be my remainder. So 254 divided by 3 is going to equal those 2 together. Remember, add your partial quotients, 84 with a remainder of 2. So she is not able to make equal groups or to use an equal amount for each one of her visits because of that 2 remainder. If she had a 0 remainder, then the answer would be yes, she absolutely can. For your next guided practice question, number 2, I'm going to walk you through the thought process I have over here that explains all these numbers. So for number 2, we are looking to divide 6,787 divided by 4. So the question asks you, how many 4s are in 6,787? So I'm going to draw my bridge. 6,787 and 4 is out here on the outside. Now I have to think, how many 4s are there in 6,000? 4 times 1,000 is going to give me 4,000. But if I do 4 times 2,000, that's going to give me 8,000. That's too high. So I can't use that one. I'm going to stick with the 1,000 for now. So I put my 1,000 over here. I subtract 4,000 from that number, and I end up with 2,787. So now I have to think, how many 4s are in 2,787? Well, I know 4 times 6 is 24. So 4 times 600 would be 2,400. Okay, let's see if I can get closer. What about 4 times 7? 4 times 7 is 28. So 4 times 700 is 2,800. That's too high. 2,800 is greater than my number over here. 2,800 is greater than 2,787. So I can't use those. I need to stick with the 4 times 600 equals 2,400. So I put my 600 up here. I subtract 2,400 and I end up with 387. So now again, I have to stop and think, how many groups of 4 are in 387? Well, I know 4 times 9 is 36. So 4 times 90 is going to give me 360. Let's see if I can go up higher. So I did 4 times 9. What if I do 4 times 10? 4 times 10 is 40, but 4 times 100 is going to give me 400, and 400 is too high. 400 is greater than what I have. I can't go past the number that I have, so I'm going to stick with the 4 times 90 equals 360. So I'm going to put my 90 up here, subtract my 360, and I'll see that I have 27 when I did that subtraction. So again, I have to stop and think, how many groups of 4 are in 27? Well, I know 4 times 6 is 24, and 4 times 7 is 28. I can't use 28, that's too high, because 28 is more than 27. So I'm going to stick with 4 times 6. So I'll put my 6 up here on top. 27 minus 24 leaves me with 3. So 3 is going to be my remainder here. There's no groups of 4 in 3. I can't divide 3 between 4 equal groups. So what I have to do next is I need to add all of my partial quotients. So 1,000 plus 600 plus 90 plus 6 is 1,696 with a remainder of 3. Now again, you can do the inverse operation and multiply 1,696 times 4. And once you find your answer, you add 3 to that answer. If you get to 6,787, you know that your work is correct. And for our last guided practice question, it asks you how many groups of 5 are there in 6,209? So I'm going to start real basic. I know that 5 times 1,000 is 5,000. So I know I can at least do 5,000. I'm going to start there. So 6,209 minus 5,000. Put my 1,000 up on top. I subtract them from each other. I end up with 1,209. So next I need to think, how many groups of 5 are there in 1,209? Well, I know 5 times 2 is 10. So 5 times 200 is 1,000. I'm going to go with that number for now. So I'm going to put 200 over here, and I'm going to subtract 1,000 from the 1,209, and I'm going to end up with 209. Next, I need to think, how many groups of 5 are there in 209? Well, I know 5 times 4 is 20, so 5 times 40 is going to give me 200. That's pretty close. Let's go with that. So I put my 40 up here. I subtract off 200, and I end up with 9. Okay. How many groups of 5 are there in 9? Well, I know there's 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 2 is 10. I can't use 5 times 2 is 10 because 5 times 2 equaling 10 is too high, because that 10 is greater than the 9 that I have. So I'm going to stick with 1. I'm going to subtract off that group of 5, and I'm going to have 4 left over. Now, I cannot share 4 equally between 5 groups. So 4 is going to be my remainder. So add together your partial quotients. 1,000 plus 200 plus 40 plus 1 will give you 1,241. So we know that 6,209 divided by 5 will give us 1,241 with a remainder of 4. Don't forget to write in your remainder. It's very important. If you leave that out, your answer will be incorrect. So remember, go through the steps, go through the thought process, think about what you're doing, write it out if you need to. Use your math notebooks or use loose leaf paper, anything to show your thinking and help you track your steps. That way, if you make a mistake or you get confused, it's easy to go back and fix it. All right, that's it for this lesson, 4th grade. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing day. Take care. Bye-bye.